Rheology Friday. I am Derrick Day, and he is.
I am Aaron Tomlinson.
Yes, you are. It's good to see you, man. I hope you've been having a wonderful week. My week's been pretty decent as far as previous weeks have been.
Yeah, good.
So I'm in a good mood. I'm excited. It's just a good day. But let's talk about what's in the glass before we get down the path of our subject at hand.
Yeah, so I'm. People can see I'm wearing my Broncos shirt. I'm from Colorado. If you're born in Colorado, you either love the Broncos or hate them. There's no in between. I have my Broncos beer glass, and I'm going to shock people because I'm on record in this show several times saying I don't like IPAs. But I have decided I like these juicy kind, like the hazy kind. So this is a Mind Haze Cosmic Cruiser IPA. So
Nice.
I haven't tried this one yet, so we'll see.
Okay. Well, as for me, I'm doing a Moscow Mule. I've got my Reed's ginger beer, which I love it because it's extra strong. And I decided to take a different approach to my vodka. I've got TLC. It's called Tastes Like Chicken. And I'm here to say, for the record, it does not fucking taste like chicken. It tastes like vodka.
That's good. Yeah, that would be good.
Vodka is like the taste like chicken of booze.
True.
It's like, oh, what does it taste like? It tastes like vodka.
Yeah, that's true. All right, here goes. Oh, that's really good.
Okay, you have to put the name of that in the chat so that everybody can run out and get it. And what is the name of the brand again?
Hold on one second. What do you need? What do you need? Sorry.
Was it Cosmic Crusher?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fire. Cosmic Crusher, in case you're listening, you can sponsor this show.
Yes.
We will drink your product. A lot of it.
I love it. Let's see here. You know what? I don't think I've ever put a comment out. I'm not sure what I need to do here.
If you just put something in the chat.
Yeah, well, actually, it doesn't work that way.
It's going to be kind of weird this time. It's going to be kind of weird, but that's okay. That's okay. Right. Cosmic Crusher.
This is, doing it live.
Yeah. The beauty of doing not just growing in real time, but broadcasting in real time. This is a live broadcast, and here we go. So, Aaron, do you want to introduce tonight's topic, or you want to kick it to me?
I'm going to let you introduce it, actually.
Okay. All right. So today we're going to talk about time. And, time. What is time? Does time exist? What is the value of time? What is good timing? Is time travel possible? We're going to talk about all of these good things tonight, but to have a working definition, I'm reading this and it says basically, to many physicists, while we experience time as psychologically real, time is not fundamentally real. At the deepest foundations of nature, time is not a primitive, irreducible element or concept required to construct reality. And that's really interesting because is time real? And one of the things that I think about is Einstein's theory of special relativity. Mm-hmm. And basically, he postulates there that time and space are essentially the same thing. Mm-hmm. Now we know that there's space, right? That there, space is the area between cosmic bodies and so on and so forth. Space is the space between you and I, the space between my face and the screen, or space, right? So we know that space is real, but time is time real? And again, physicists, there's a body of scholarship that holds that time isn't real. So let's take a look at another definition here and say, what is time? Because we need to have a fundamental definition or working definition of that. And so time is the measuring period between the past, present, and future. Now, that's a pretty vague answer. It's a pretty ambiguous answer, but it gives us a working definition. How do we determine what is the past, what is the present, what is the future? So we articulate that or quantify that by time, right? And here's the thing: if we didn't measure time, if we didn't quantify time, does time actually exist? So those are some of the things that I want to deal with tonight, because it's something that we haven't talked about, and I think that this is a really good subject.
Yeah. So, if we decide time is an illusion, are we going to have to change our growing in real time? Growing in real time. Get
it? Okay, so maybe we're growing in hypothetical time.
I don't know. I mean, the flip side is, if it can it be, like, I get what you're saying, or what they're saying, the physicists, it can be quantified. So can something that's not real be quantified? That's kind of a question I would have just off the bat. And certainly this is way above my pay grade as far as to physics and stuff like that. But I do actually have spent quite a bit of time. And every time I say that, it's just not going to work for me. I have spent quite a bit of time thinking about and even being trained on psychological time. And so it's interesting there. So let's say there is or isn't objective time, right?
Right.
But there is definitely subjective time. Now, the question becomes, because time is the way that we organize and create our lives. I think it wasn't on this. I was on a different podcast where I talked about this, but it's just kind of self-evident that as human beings, we have to have a story that we tell ourselves. We have to have some kind of narrative in order to connect with each other, in order to understand who we are, our place in the world, in order to have conversations. If you didn't have any kind of story, you would have no sense of any kind of stability in your identity at all. Mm-hmm. So that requires that we record the events of our life as past, present, and future. Now, what's really fascinating about this on a psychological level is not everybody records time the same way. And you can almost always tell how somebody records time by their gestures. So you notice I'm doing this.
Yep.
So my timeline is out in front of me, at least right now.
Right.
It's going, my timeline usually actually goes from right to left, not left to right, like most people would think. So past, present, future, right?
Yeah.
But that can also shift with context. So when you are organizing time this way, studies show that you are much more conscious of time. Being on time to something is more important to you. You're aware of the time. I don't know about you, but I got to where I could just intuitively preach for an hour. I didn't set or 30 minutes or whatever it was. I just kind of knew, I mean, I'd look up at the clock or whatever, but I just kind of knew it's done. So that's usually people that organize time this way. Other people, or in other contexts, because you can shift, it's not one way or the other, will organize time this way. And usually the past will be behind us. Mm-hmm. So again, when I said, you can notice how people gesture with their hands. If somebody's going, that was a long time ago, or I'm putting that away, their timeline is going this way, the way they perceive it psychologically, right? So the future is out in front of them. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you have your timeline this way going through you, you lose all track of time. So if you've ever been in a conversation with someone, which I'm sure you have, I think we're enough alike that you can relate to this, where it's just, you sit there and you talk and 3 or 4 hours have gone by, right? And you're just like, wow, I can't believe that much time has gone by. Or you're having a fun day or something, or you're engrossed in a project, whatever, and you can just like stay in that space forever without even any kind of an awareness of time. That's because you're perceiving yourself as in time instead of out of time, if that makes sense. So if my timeline's here, I'm out of it. But if it's running through me, I'm in time. So when you're in time, you're more in the present moment.
Right.
So if you learn these things, if you want to organize something, if you want to plan something like a major event that's coming up in a few weeks or something,
Yeah.
and a person struggles to do that, it's probably because they're trying to do it while they're in time. And so if you can shift, but this can be disorienting. The first time you have somebody do this, they can get dizzy. It can be, it's a crazy thing. So just a couple of things about psychological time that I think is kind of interesting.
Well, you mentioned, like, when you're looking at time in a linear forward facing perspective, that you're in time, and you bring up something that's really key, because we talk a lot about being in the moment, right? Dwelling in the moment. And I think that, like, when we put our timeline, when we slice our timeline like this, now we're operating outside of time. In other words, I'm out here and I'm looking at time, subjectively in front of me.
Yep.
But when I'm in the moment, I'm objectively in time, because objectively the past is behind me, right? Because as I'm moving forward in my life, in my timeline, I'm moving forward against what's behind me. So to your point, you're actually in the moment when you look at it this way. And so what I'm thinking is, and this is a growing in real time moment.
Yeah.
Because we tend to think of time as being linear, but what if time is spatial? What if it's multidimensional?
Right.
And I think that what you're postulating here is that we have to think of it multidimensionally. You have to be outside of time in order to track time, so that when to wake up, when to depart for work, when to take your lunch, and when to go home. You have to look at it this way, right? But if you're in a conversation, just like, you and I, we're talking now, we're in the moment, right? We're face to face. So this time construct is going through us. Now, let me throw out something here that this is really going to mess you up, because you mentioned, so now we're thinking of time as multidimensional. We're thinking of it, let's say this is like, say, an x-axis and this is a y-axis, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So now we're creating a multidimensional structure. But if we're talking face to face, right? If I'm forward in time, does that mean you're going backward in time? if we're face to face.
Here's something else. This gives me a chance to do some Mythbuster stuff here. So I don't know, anybody that's ever done interrogation has probably learned about eye accessing cues, watching someone, and there's kind of a myth out there with body language that you can tell if somebody's lying by which way their eyes go. So typically it says if their eyes go up and to the left, they're remembering. If their eyes go up and to the right, they are making something, they're making shit up, right?
Okay.
So the truth is, if I were to ask somebody that's functioning this way, and I were to ask them, think about your 16th birthday, right? And if I were to ask them, I want you to orient me to where you see that spatially when you look at it. It's going to be, if their timeline runs this way, it's going to be to the left.
Right.
Where do you see the future? They're actually going to see it over here in their mind. It's like, it's not going to be front and center imagination. It's going to be over here a little bit.
Yeah.
But see, my problem is my timeline usually goes right to left. So if I'm remembering, my eyes are going to go up to the right. So it is a great technique for knowing if somebody's telling the truth or if they're making it up or a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But you've got to know their baseline, because not everybody's the same. So just a little bit of nerdy.
No, that's actually really good, because I know me, I look up and away when I'm trying to recall something, or if I'm trying to put a thought together. And I've never really paid attention to whether I'm looking to the left or to the right, but I know that I do this. I know that I do that. As I go back and I look at our videos, and I can see where I'm fishing for a thought, and I'm like, and I do that. Now, am I just blowing smoke and bullshit? No, that's not what I'm doing. When I'm looking up and away, I'm actually looking for something. I just don't know which way I'm looking. But I think that might be that might have something to do with how I orient time.
Yeah, and the truth is, a person can't not do it.
Yeah.
Our eyes are moving all the time based on however we're structuring our reality inside. So it's just interesting.
And I'm writing a book on speeches, right? And
Mm.
when you're speaking publicly, you might have a specific person or group that you fix on for a moment, and you make eye contact with that person. But then there's a technique where you're going to sweep the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that gives the audience the illusion of you're making eye contact with them specifically.
Mm.
So, but again, it's like if you're looking at that from an interrogative standpoint, it is the person who's using the sweep technique. Are they blowing smoke and bullshit, or are they actually connected with the audience? But that's another thing. We'll have to tackle that at another time.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But one of the things that I want to talk about is like, okay, when we talk about special relativity and Einstein's theory and the whole concept of space-time, that basically Einstein postulated that space and time are essentially the same thing. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because gravity is said to warp space, right? So the more mass an object has, the more space it warps. So then the question begs, if you're warping space, are you similarly warping time? In other words, is time different on, say, Jupiter, which is 1,000 times more massive than the Earth, than it is on the Earth? And that's an interesting thing. Also, when you look at the inner planets like Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, right? That a Venusian day is almost an Earth year. It's 200 and something days. But Mars actually has a 23-hour day. So the question is, now all of the three these three planets, Venus and Earth, are very close in mass. Mars is a little bit smaller, but is time the same on all of them? Or when you look at our gas giants in the outer solar system, is time different on them because of the mass? I mean, if space is warped because of gravity, then time also must be warped. And that's, I'm just throwing that out there as a discussion point, because that takes us back to the whole thing, is time real? Because it can, if something is real, can it be innately distorted? Because if something is real, like for example, this bottle is real. This cup is real. I could quantify those things. But in order to modify them in any meaningful way, this glass can be broken, this cup can be dented. But if I'm going to, fundamentally change them, I have to like melt them or super cool them in order to fundamentally change them. So that is what it would take to warp this reality. But time, if time and space are synonymous and you can warp space with mass, then you can warp time with mass. I'm just throwing it out there.
Interesting. So what are your thoughts then on time travel?
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have a hypothesis, and this is something fairly recent, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I have come to the conclusion that time travel is not possible. And here's why, right? That, if you look at the movie, The Time Machine, it's based on the H.G. Wells novel.
Yeah.
that the time that it takes to go from one point in time to another takes time.
I see what you did there.
So exactly, and so immediately the gap in the space time continuum is automatically distorted by the time that it takes to go from one place to another. So in other words, we let's say if we come up with a Wayback Machine like Peabody and Sherman, we're able to go back to a specific point in time. How long does it take to get from here to there? And so that time that it takes from here to there distorts the time travel itself, which my conclusion is, my hypothesis is that in order for time travel to be possible, that instantaneous transportation of matter must be possible. Now, this is not to say that it's impossible, because we know about the principle of quantum entanglement, right?
Yeah.
And they have split, like, say, a photon and put one piece of it in San Jose, California, and another one in Stockholm, Sweden. And if you spin one, the other one spins. And this happens. This is instantaneous. There is no lag. But that begs the question: is there actually lag? Because the way that they're able to communicate this, the scientists, is through what? IP communication, right? Internet protocol. Which we know that there's a lag in internet protocol. Even if it's tiny, it can be milliseconds, but we know that there's a lag. So the scientists say, okay, I've spun one, I've spun the other. They spin at the same time. But do they? Because we don't have a real time purview of both simultaneously. So on the one hand, quantum entanglement would say, sure, time travel is possible if you can split the quantum particle and basically influence or impact either one on both ends. Which I'm going to throw something else out there, right? To get really nerdy, I'm going to get really in the nerdy weeds here, right? The Star Trek transporter.
Yep.
The Star Trek transporter is basically a device that breaks you down to the quantum level and reassembles you someplace else. Somebody, I forget where, I think this was like in a Reddit thread where I read this, but basically this person postulated that if you're transported, basically you die and are resurrected every time you're transported. And I was like, holy shit, that's deep. But so is time travel possible? By my hypothesis, no. Now, is my hypothesis, peer reviews, tested and all that? No, it's not. It's just my hypothesis. But what do you think, Aaron?
Well, I'm glad you shared your hypothesis, because I have one of my own, and I am absolutely 100% going to demonstrate for people the Dunning-Kruger effect right now. Because I'm going to speak with certainty about this.
See, I thought you were going to say I'm going to emphatically say that time travel exists or doesn't exist, one way or the other. But instead, you threw out the Dunning-Kruger effect, man. 1,000 cool points for that. But keep going.
No, for real. Now, my son Josiah, he heard us. That's who I was talking to at the beginning, and he heard you mention something about time travel, and he looks at me and he says, "Yes," because he has watched video after video of just on physics and time travel, and so he could give you. I'm not that guy, so this is a Dunning-Kruger effect. I do not believe that time travel exists, and here's why. It's my hypothesis. Mm-hmm. Because if it exists, someone's already doing it.
Yeah.
Because if I can go into the past, right?
Yeah.
I'm coming from the future, which means that future exists, which means that all futures exist.
Yep.
Which means if time travel is possible in the future, someone from the future has already invented it or figured it out.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we would know about it, but hypothetically, stay with me. It is a
Yep.
hypothesis, right? If time travel was possible, we'd already be doing it because somebody
Yeah.
from the future would be doing it. And so therefore, again, they could be doing it. We don't know about it. But hypothetically, since we don't know about it, it's not possible.
Now, and I think that this is something that we talked about before, is that every time you make a decision, you
Yeah.
create an alternative universe kind of thing, right? That every decision creates, a tangent universe. It basically creates another bubble, right? Because every time you make a decision, the decision that you don't take, it still exists somewhere, right? So either the decision or the indecision creates some alternate reality, which means and that tracks with multiverse theory that says that that there are multiple universes that exist, or possibly an infinite number of universes that exist. So but the thing is that, to your point, does time travel exist? Well, if you say that every time, let's say somebody does create a mechanism for traveling through time, are they actually traveling in the same dimension in time, or are they creating another construct based on their travel?
That's
And
the
so, you know, so to your point, I'm in agreement with you. I don't think that time travel is possible. I think that you either create or influence another timeline, but you never impact or influence the timeline that you're intending to.
So I do have to throw this out. If anybody goes to my YouTube channel, a couple of years ago, I interviewed my friend Brian Scott. Brian has a great YouTube channel called The Reality Revolution.
Love
Tons
it.
of great content and stuff there. So his testimony, the way he got into just what he's doing, and since I'm wearing my Broncos stuff, I don't know why I wore it. It's not football season, but drinking out of my Broncos cup. I'm in rare form tonight, aren't I, Derrick? So when the Broncos won Super Bowl 50, Brian's a big Bronco fan like I am, and so he was just kicking back at his place in California, enjoying. Your team won the Super Bowl finally, so you're watching all the interviews and all that stuff that they do after. Had it on ESPN, and he noticed he had a cat. He says cat was like his best friend at the time, right? And he had left his door open, and he was worried that his cat had gotten out. So he goes to close the door, and when he went to close the door, there was a guy pointing a .22 pistol at him. And I trust Brian. I mean, I trust especially the way he tells the story. You can find this on my channel. You can also find it on his.
Yeah.
The testimony. So he turns around, and he said everything started moving in slow motion. And he could see various different versions of himself taking different paths to try to get away from this person pointing a gun at him. And he said he heard the shot go off, but it was super slow. And he said he remembers hearing, he had double pane glass. He remembers hearing both
Panes shatter.
Panes shatter. And then he's looking, and like over here, he's lying in a pool of blood. Over here, he's getting away or whatever. So while he's watching this, he takes the path where he doesn't die.
Wow.
And he feels the bullet bounce off of his back. Now, Brian's not, in my opinion, he's not given the sensationalism. And so he's like, it's maybe the glass slowed it down enough, and with my shirt and everything, it just lost enough momentum to go through me. But anyway, long story short, the next day he's going for a jog where he always goes for a jog. And there's this empty park that he would run through all the time. And he gets there, and there's buildings instead of the empty lot where he used to run through.
Oh, wow.
And he said there are people contacting him that he was friends with in school, but had not kept up with since he had graduated high school. And he's going through his phone, and he's seeing where they have long text threads where he's talked to these people. And he said, my kids were into totally different types of music. And so all these like weird anomalies and stuff. So he thought he was losing his mind. So he went out, and his background is in speech and debate research, stuff like that. In fact, I think he has a master's in that field in some way, shape, or form. So he said he read every book, article, everything that had ever been written on the multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually how he got into spirituality and some of the other stuff that he does today, because he was trying to figure the shit out, right? And trying to convince himself that he wasn't crazy. So just an interesting, I mean, you know, people have stories, man. People have weird shit happen to them. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that in.
No, that's really good. And and this is funny, like if you go through outside of Detroit on US 10, which is the John C. Lodge Freeway, just when you get into Southfield, Michigan, you'll go through this corridor of really new buildings, right? Really new buildings and all of that. And I remember when I was a kid, none of that existed. But I remember one time I was driving through there as a teenager, and all of this was fully developed. I could see it as clear as it exists today, but it didn't exist then. And then I remember, I left Detroit, joined the Navy, and years later I come back and I'm driving through this corridor, and it's exactly like I saw it in my mind's eye.
Mm.
So the thing is that I don't believe in time travel per se, but I do believe in what they call interdimensional peering, right? So let me give you an example of this in real life, right? So when you're dealing with public cloud like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure, that basically when you set up a configuration, you're creating like a project or a subscription, right? And everything, all the servers, all the storage, all the memory, all the networking is in that project, right? But let's say you have another division of your company that needs to set up something, but it needs to be isolated, right? But somebody comes along and says, "Hey, I need to create a pathway where where this part of the company's business can communicate with this part of the company's business." So in order to do that, you have to set up something that's called peering, right? And it involves some secure tunneling between these two projects. And it allows these projects, it can be a one-way peering where one can see data in the other, but the other can't see the data in the first one, or it can be two-way so that they can just, share information or certain aspects of information on this pathway that's defined. So this is what I think. I think that, and this is, we talked about this before. I think that people who have what I call unreal success, that these are people that are able to peer multidimensionally, because like for example, Facebook, right? Meta, Mark Zuckerberg. This came out of essentially nowhere.
Yeah.
And this guy was a nobody, and now Meta is like the fifth largest software company in the world. And Mark Zuckerberg is one of the wealthiest people. But this came literally out of nowhere. It was just like, one day he's, Mark Zuckerberg, student at Harvard, and the next thing you know, he's Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, right? And one of the richest people in the world. Likewise, what's the other company I want to pick on? NVIDIA. NVIDIA makes graphics processors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And NVIDIA was like nothing. It was just another tech company, and then all of a sudden, GPU, graphics processing units, becomes a big thing, and now NVIDIA is like the hot stock, right? What happened? What took that from ordinary to phenomenon? Now, you could go and look at some books like Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point and say, okay, the tipping point explains it, but it doesn't. It doesn't. the tipping point talks about how hush puppy shoes go from being a fad to being a trend. That's something that we can all wrap our mind around. Somebody with some influence starts wearing hush puppies to posh parties, and all of a sudden everybody latches onto that. It becomes a trend. That makes sense. But when you look at how Microsoft became Microsoft, or how Meta became Meta, or how TikTok became TikTok. These are things that defy business logic. You
Right.
you can't say, okay, I'm reverse engineering this, and so that I can see how this happened, and now I can repeat this process iteratively. You
Mhm.
can't. There's something there. Or Amazon. That's the one I want to really pick on.
Yeah.
Amazon.
Oh
Jeff
yeah.
Bezos is selling books online from a computer in his parents' garage. And suddenly Amazon is the second biggest company on earth. How does this happen? You know, what so what I'm getting at, Aaron, is this: that these people, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Jeff Bezos, I forget what the CEO of Nvidia is, or the Steve Jobs, or Steve Wozniak. These guys are able to peer beyond our dimension. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm getting out here. I'm getting in the nerd world, folks. I'm getting deep in the nerd world, but
Yeah.
I believe that these people, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, even, these people are seeing beyond what we know to be reality. And they're seeing something on the other side, or another side, and they're bringing something back
Hmm.
that they can use. And so when they do this, I mean, because again, like, let's talk about Michael Jordan for just a quick second, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so you have basketball players like Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain was so fucking good that they changed the rules of basketball for him. They changed the height of the rim. They changed the size of the key. They changed a whole bunch of things because Wilt was just fucking dominating people, right? So here Michael Jordan shows up, and he exploits everything that Wilt, made possible.
Yeah.
And he did it in ways that it just defied logic. If you say, okay, if I train somebody to do X, Y, and Z, this is what the result would be. You can't do that with Michael Jordan. And because of that, nobody's been able to reproduce Michael Jordan. It's like you could say Kobe Bryant is close. You could say LeBron James is close, but nobody's been able to duplicate that. Or let me pick on the Denver Broncos and John Elway. John Elway was kind of also ran quarterback. I mean, he was at Stanford, he had this big arm, and he was Heisman Trophy. I think he was a Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah.
But he
No,
gets to the ground. He didn't win,
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
but he was a candidate. He was a Heisman
Oh yeah,
candidate.
for sure.
But
Yeah.
but here's the thing: Elway gets to the Broncos and doesn't really have any success. But then he tears that bicep muscle. He has the surgery to repair it, and then all of a sudden, John Elway is resetting record books.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of quarterbacks. What's the name? Drew Brees. Drew Brees had the same surgery, right? And granted, Drew Brees did win a Super Bowl. He left San Diego, went to New Orleans, won a Super Bowl. But John Elway did it twice. You know what I'm saying is that I don't think that it was just the surgery. I don't think that it was the training regimen. I think that John Elway peered into another dimension and saw something and brought it back. Now, and again, this is getting deep into nerd weeds, but this is my hypothesis. I
Yeah.
think that when you look at phenomenal success, because when, like, you can reverse engineer some success. Like, for example, Henry Ford. Henry Ford, people ascribe the automobile assembly line to him, but he didn't. He's not the guy, right? The guy who actually did it was a guy named Ransom E. Olds, who's famous for Oldsmobile. Ransom Olds is the father of the automotive assembly line. But what Henry Ford did is, with Thomas Edison's money, reverse engineered what Olds did and scaled it, right? So that's something that makes sense. It works. And anybody that did that, so William Durant did that with the Chevrolet brothers, and so on and so on and so on, and built General Motors, right? They all reverse engineered each other. But you can't reverse engineer Amazon. You can't reverse engineer Facebook. You can't reverse engineer NVIDIA. You can come up with all the tech in the world. You can't reverse engineer Apple. And Apple, the whole Apple model is really simple. And yet it can't be duplicated. That's because there's something not of this world in it. Okay, so now I'm going to jump down from my soapbox at this point.
No, those are good. Those are all good thoughts. Things that make you go, No, I absolutely believe in that as well. Absolutely affirm that, believe in that. Let me put my signal light on to change course here a little bit, because I'm thinking about this. And again, this is just, growing in real time. But would time matter to us? See what I did there?
Yeah.
would time matter to us if there was no entropy in the universe? In other words, if we didn't die, things didn't erode, or stars didn't burn out, or the universe didn't, whatever it's going to do. Lots of hypotheses or theories out there about what it's going to do. But just as human beings, if that was not part of reality at all, and there was no death, would we even think about time?
That's a good question. Could it be, based on what you said, now I'm growing in real time too, could it be that death is the driver of what we consider to be time?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going. That's exactly what I'm asking. Yeah, interesting to think about. And that, that just brings up so much other stuff for me, because time's always been a trigger for me in a lot of ways. Just being personal here and disclosing. I've got a couple members of my family that being on time is not important to them. And being early is anathema to them. And so that can create some tension, that can create a lot of tension. And I envy them in a way, because I will put pressure on myself to be somewhere on time, to meet deadlines, even deadlines that aren't important. But here's the other thing. I think I was a late bloomer. Maybe some people probably say, what are you talking about, Aaron? You haven't bloomed yet. But but I didn't have to start really shaving my face till I was 30. I went back and kind of started, this career, certainly middle-aged, later in life. Went back to school in my mid-30s to finish my bachelor's degree and get my master's. So I always felt I should be further along by now. I should be further along by now. I should be further along by now.
Yeah.
And that was a major stressor for me, right? And now that I'm approaching my mid-50s, I'm like, what the hell just happened? Do you ever wake up, Derrick, and just think, this can't be
fucking
real.
Day.
This can't be real. I can't be at this stage of life, right? And so all of that is imposed by a termination date, whenever that may be.
Yeah.
So time can be something that can create conflict in human relationships.
Yeah.
Time is something that can put stress and pressure on us. And you started out talking about being in the present moment. It really can cause us to miss the moments, right? Like I'm just at a point in life where, especially with my kids being the ages they are, I want all those moments to count, you know. Pull up in the driveway and the boys are there. Like I don't take that for granted at all. So it's just mind blowing to think about. And then you think worry is related to time.
Yeah.
Because you're forecasting a future that hasn't happened yet, but that could possibly happen in order to try to be prepared to stop it or do something should that particular incident in the future arrive.
Yep.
And one of the things I tell my clients that have a lot of anxiety, just realize your crystal ball is broken. like most of the stuff that we are forecasting, like when we are worrying, we are engaging to some degree in fortune telling.
Yep.
And we're not that good at it. So really it's the stuff that you don't see that's going to come up and bite you in the ass.
I've heard this. The worrying is robbing the future. Worry is stealing from the future. In other words, your future can be promising, it can be bright, but because you have worry, you're taken away from that.
Yep.
And so, I want to throw something else out here too, because the value of time, because for example, I could say, Aaron, can you lend me $20? And you say, sure, Derrick, no problem. So you lend me $20. I can give you the $20 back, right? I can even give you the $20 back with interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could say, hey, Aaron, let me borrow that Broncos shirt. And you can say, well, I would, but you're like bigger than me, so you're gonna ruin my shirt. So no, I'm not gonna do it. But I'll lend you another Broncos shirt, and I can put that on, and I can give it back.
Mm-hmm.
I can borrow your car and give it back, right? But time, whatever time that is exchanged between you and I, you give me an hour of your time to talk. I can never give that back to you. It's irredeemable. People always talk about redeeming the time. There is no redemption of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like once a second. Because I've asked people, I said, I've asked this like in speeches. I said, what is the most valuable thing on earth? What is the most valuable thing on earth? And people will say, well, gold or platinum, diamonds, they'll come up with all these different physical things. And I say, no, the most valuable thing on earth is 1 second. Because once it's gone, it's gone.
Profound.
I mean, that's it. It's done. And then when you start talking about compounding seconds, when you start talking about minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and I don't know about you, but there are times when I've woke up in the morning and I'm like, holy fuck, I just wasted a whole week. And it grieves me to a high degree because I realize that I can never get that back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can maybe do some things that mitigate that loss, but I can never completely eliminate it. That time is gone.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I tell people is that know the value of your time. Like I can tell you how much 1 second of my time is worth. And I know that because as a consultant, I bill by the hour.
Right.
So I can just reverse engineer that and say, okay, hours, minutes, seconds, right? And that's easy. But most people don't know that. Most people don't really calculate the value of the time. And then here's the other thing too, is that a lot of times we associate our value with our work. Right? So you say, okay, I make $100 an hour, right? So if I make $100 an hour, divide that by 60 to get the number of minutes, divide that by 60 to get the number of seconds, and then I know what that value is. But there is so much more to life than work.
Yeah.
And it could be that the value of your time, if you're a husband, if you're a father, if you're a grandfather, if you're a civic leader, your time maybe more valuable than that. It could be 2 or 3 times, 5 times, 10 times worth more than that. And the thing is, we don't really understand the value of our time. But we've talked about this before, is that most people really don't have a sense of self-worth.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
if you don't have a sense of self-worth, how can you calculate the time value of your worth? You can't. So it's like one of those things you got to figure out, okay, what am I worth to humanity? What am I worth to society? What am I worth to my family? What am I worth to my community? Not just what am I worth to my employer who's writing my check, or my customers who are writing my check. What is the true value? What is the true value of my time? And most people don't know that. And I think that's something that everybody that's watching, I challenge you to go back and look at what is the value of your time. I remember there was a story of a child who asked his father, "Daddy, how much is an hour of your time worth?" And so the father told his son that, and a couple of weeks later, kid shows up with an amount of money equivalent to an hour's worth of his time. He said, "I just want to buy an hour of your time, Daddy." Yeah. That one, Aaron. My response to that was exactly like yours.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking, in this economic system that we have, we are selling our time.
Yeah.
Most people. I mean, that's the gap, right, between the haves and the have-nots. As have-nots or have less, we end up selling our time. We work for an hourly wage, most of us, or we're salaried. That's even worse.
Yeah.
Salary is just synonymous with selling your life, not your time.
Yeah. Right. So basically, we're all prostitutes, right? It's just that when we're on salary, we're on retainer.
Yeah. Whereas wealthy people are making money off of their money at the end of the day.
Right. The wealthy people are the pimps.
Yeah. Off their assets and whatever else. So it's just interesting to think about. You were talking, we were talking last week, and you brought up basic income, right?
Yeah.
Basic living income. What
universal basic income.
Yeah, universal basic income. But what if the system was different, where we were paid based on the value our productivity actually brought to something or someone? You see what I'm saying? And I know there are jobs out there like that, but it's not how many hours I work for you in your factory or your school or your whatever.
What do I add to the bottom line?
Company, exactly. And if there would be fair compensation for those things, so that you weren't selling your time, you were selling your productivity, if that makes sense. It's just interesting to think about. I mean, it's really is you mentioned the H.G. Wells novel, and it really is like that in a lot of ways, where you have the Eloys and what were the anyway. I know what you're talking about. I forget, but you had basically the slave laborers, right? Yep. And then you had those that were benefiting and profiting off of that labor at the top. And it's still, our whole system is set up that way. And then what's really disgusting is when factories can go, and I'm not on a crusade here, because I can't change this shit. But when factories go and pay, go to countries where they can pay even less for a person's time, so they can make even more profits off of their backs, off of their labors.
Yep.
And it's just when you put it the way you put it, that the most valuable thing in the world is a second.
Yep.
That's heavy. And then you think about the system and, what is your time worth and all of that? Because at the end of the day, I don't care if you're making $1 million an hour. That $1 million still can't touch the value of that time.
It can't. And here's the thing. So you were talking about like labor, like foreign labor versus domestic labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the great problems with society is that we figured out how to structure castes. You know, people speak negatively about the Indians, the Hindu Indians, and their caste system, but there is a global caste system,
For sure.
and all of us are in different castes, and so what business has done is they've learned how to exploit that, right? Because a factory worker in Detroit is worth more than a factory worker in China, relatively speaking. The reality is that all of them have the same, what is it? Was it 24,600 seconds in a day? No, it's not that. It's not that. 32,000.
No
I
idea.
can't remember.
I can do the math.
Yeah. Hang on for a second. I'm gonna pull this up. Um, how many seconds are in a day? This is easy one. 86,400.
Okay.
86. So we all have the same capital starting off, right? It's just that somebody's assigned a higher value to the capital or to the cost of labor in the United States than, say, China or India or the Philippines or Mexico, right? But imagine if everybody's second was valued the same. Then it's no longer beneficial to the bottom line to find cheaper labor, because labor is labor, right? And that's, but what I'm getting at is that people in, say, third world countries, and I hate using that term, but people who are in third world countries don't have the same concept of their time value or their value regarding time. So they'll accept less. And as long as they're willing to accept less, that means that puts us here in America, in the United States, at a disadvantage, because our value is higher. And companies, as they're more driven toward padding the bottom line, increasing their shareholders' ROI, it becomes difficult for us to compete. And so, this is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people who are business oriented or conservative, they are opposed to labor movements, because if we were to say that we're going to have global solidarity regarding labor, then that means a laborer in India says, okay, if the labor rate is $14 an hour in the US, that's what I want here. Because, like, to give you an example, Tesla is about to open, or they're about to build a plant in Mexico. Why? Because, first of all, their first plant was where? California, right? So they're building cars in California, but then they say, oh, we can build cars cheaper in the US and Texas, right? So they build a plant in Texas. But then they're saying, okay, we need to build cars for foreign markets. Okay, we know that labor costs are higher in Germany, but because of the cost of actually moving cars from the US to Germany is going to be more, it's actually cheaper for us to build cars in Europe, in Germany, in Berlin. So you get a gigafactory there. And then they say, okay, we need to build cars for everywhere else, so we're going to build cars in China. And so now you have this global model where you have multiple Tesla employees around the world that are making different amounts of money. Their time is not valued the same.
Right.
But in reality, 1 second is 1 second.
Right.
No matter where you are. It's like, I don't care whether I'm in India or China or Mexico or Germany. It's like that 1 second, once it's gone, it's gone. So the thing is that when you start talking about labor movements and what you start talking about what is the value of an hour's worth of labor, conservatives don't want that to be discussed, because if that gets discussed in a broader context, then these other countries are going to say, well, shit, you know, uh, we want $14 an hour too,
Right.
right? And now you have a uniform wage around the world, and there are no um, uh, profitability gains to be made by migrating labor from one market to another.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah. So let me ask, how are we doing on time? Because I want to bring one other component.
we are at an hour.
Okay, I want to respect your time. So you said we needed to keep it to an hour. So
An hour. Keep it going, man.
all right, signal light again, making a change. But just this kind of maybe last thing I wanted to throw in. People often comment on this show about our chemistry that we have together. One of the reasons we have chemistry is because we pace well. So here's what I mean. We kind of think and talk and interact at the same speed in how we relate to time. I got to ask you, does it drive you nuts when someone, because this is important, because we're talking about how we spend our time.
Yeah.
When someone just really takes their time talking and has to go deep in thought, or like my wife and I have this battle, and it's just a difference. It's something we had to learn. But I remember, I swear, I'm sure I'm exaggerating, but like on one of our first dates, I got out of the car. I got out of the car and I'm holding the door for her to, the place we're going into, and she's still getting the seatbelt off.
And you're like, what the hell?
And that has been another rub, right? Where it's just like, and I was laughing because I was thinking of this Zootopia scene where the rabbit goes in to get the driver's license or whatever, and she's talking to the sloths, and it's like, da-da-da! And then the sloths are like talking. But that is an important issue, and I don't think our chemistry would work if we were paced differently, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I think that makes perfect sense, that we're aligned in terms of the timing of our speech and our thoughts.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So let me say this, because you're talking about Julie, I'm going to talk about Maya here, right? Because I've been taught to be a gentleman, right? So I want to open her door all the time, right?
Yeah.
She'll just open her door and get out, right? And she'll say, it's not efficient for you to come around and open my door. She's a lawyer, so it's like, everything, time is money, right? So she's like, she says it's more efficient for me to just open my door and get out. She said, I appreciate you, baby, but so I get it. That's the thing. And I think that when you talk about compatibility, when you talk about being equally or unequally yoked, use the Bible term. Yeah. I think that equally or unequally yoked has more to do with how we view time than anything else.
Sure.
It has nothing to do with spirituality or belief or faith or anything like that. I think that really, because the most important or the most precious commodity is time. Mm-hmm. I want to throw one last thing out before we close, right?
Absolutely.
Because there is a Stephen King novel that deals with these things called Langoliers.
Yep.
And the Langoliers basically eat the past. They're creatures that eat the past. And so in order for you to stay ahead or to survive into the next moment, you have to stay ahead of the Langoliers. And one of the things that I'm thinking is that in order for you to be relevant, in order for you to be successful, you literally have to outrun your past. Mm-hmm. You have to outpace your past. And I think that this is one of the things that we struggle with, because a lot of times we get hung up in our past.
Yeah.
I know I do sometimes,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you do sometimes.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure do.
and if we get stuck in our past, then we're not able to produce or progress to the next evolution in our future, and that time gets eaten up, it gets consumed.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to throw that out there as
Dude, that movie, I didn't read the book or whatever, but that movie freaked me out, man.
it did. That movie actually really did, because these people are like are disappearing off this plane, and why? Because you look back in the back, and these things are just
Yeah.
eating time.
Yeah, and the message is pretty cool. I mean, not that Stephen King's always known for his, I hesitate to say moral message, but there is kind of a moral message in it, because if I remember right, one of the main character's mom used to tell him the Langoliers are coming, the Langoliers are coming.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of really getting over procrastination, right?
Yep.
And so that movie really impacted me, because I do procrastinate more now than I used to, for sure. So that's just a good reminder that the Langoliers are coming. But I love how you said you've got to outpace your past.
Yeah.
You've got to get ahead of your past. I do think there's value in being future oriented. Yes, we want to be in the present moment. Yes, we want to enjoy those moments like we were talking about earlier, but also just being able to be future oriented. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Future oriented. See, now you'll know you'll know when by people's gestures. Remember, past is over here, future is over here.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important to be future oriented in a healthy and productive way, realizing what a limited resource we have, but also realizing that I just love the idea. I used to preach this, and I know it doesn't work as well anymore with current belief systems. But I used to say, your present is being influenced more by whatever the future is that's pulling you into the future than it is the byproduct. Oh, see what I just did there?
Oh, dude, you're killing it, man. You're killing it.
Byproduct of your past. It's funny, because when I talk about my past, when I talk about me as a person, it's always this way. Always. So just perfect example of context. But I don't know. I just like that idea that there is a future, there is a possibility, there is a potential for better, for my God, my preaching days are coming back. Like Oral Roberts used to say, something good is going to happen to you, right?
Yeah.
I think there is something very empowering and very beneficial about that way of thinking. And then if we can think, okay, I'm moving into this, and it's more about what I'm moving into than what I'm moving away from.
Yep. Exactly.
I just really find that to be a powerful and empowering concept personally. And, I'm sure other people do as well.
Well, I mean, the old adage is, and I'm sure you preached this before, that's why the windshield is 20 times larger than the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
Right? Because where you're going is way more important than where you've been. Now, I want to close by saying this: that when we plan, we should plan as if we'll live forever, but we should live as if there's no tomorrow.
I like that.
And that's kind of like where I am right now. I want to make plans. I'm hoping that I live to be 117 years old.
Yeah.
That's my literal goal, right? But I want to live as if it could all come crashing down tomorrow.
Some of my unhealthy lifestyle habits is my doctor's fault.
Ooh.
And I'll tell you why. Because it was a little comic strip, but here was the message to the comic strip. Like, the guy comes into the doctor and his joints are breaking down. He's blind. He can't hear very well. He can't remember things as well as he used to. but his heart is ticking like a motherfucker. His liver is in perfect shape, and his lungs won't quit breathing. And then the point of the comic strip was live a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, yeah, I don't want to be that guy. 117 sounds awesome if it has vitality attached to it, you know?
Yeah, I want to live to be 117, but I don't want anybody changing my diapers either.
Exactly. I don't be sitting in some place somewhere with some cranky CNA.
Exactly.
Only making $10 an hour or whatever it is. Deal with my poopy diaper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, now that is growing in real time.
That is indeed. Indeed. I don't know about you, man, but I really enjoyed this subject. I enjoyed this topic because
That's great. I love it.
time is, I think that may be the most underrated subject in all. I think that we don't devote enough time to see what I did there to thinking about time.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, you went meta time.
Meta time. Thank you. That's deep, man. That's deep.
How can you go meta time if time doesn't exist? Oh God. Oh, my brain's about to explode.
I used to work for a guy. He used to always say, "Oh, that makes my brain hurt."
Yeah. Derrick, loved it, man. Loved this episode. Really appreciate you, man. Can't tell you enough. This is always, and for everybody that's watching, everybody that's listening, it's always worth my time on a Friday night to spend with you guys here on Phreology Friday, growing in real time.
And that's a good place to leave it, man. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk. Love you, man.
Love you too, man. Take care.
All right.